I think a great way to kind of simplify this down is getting into money versus currency,
Yeah.
right? Because Bitcoin is money, but what we call money today is not really money; it's currency, and that's the real problem. So we've gone through this process of I guess I want to call it evolution, but I guess it's more like devolution because we've gone backwards. We had real money in the form of gold, and then banks would take that gold and hold it on their balance sheet as an asset, and then they would issue paper, and that paper note would be a claim for the gold that they held. So
Yes.
that's what I would call a paper commodity money, because it's paper, but it's still derived its value from the underlying asset, which was gold, which is a commodity.
Yeah.
The real trick that happened here, and we're not taught about this in school, so millennials, we're not going to hear about this going through K through 12 or even in secondary education, right? You're just not going to hear it. You're not going to be taught this. But there is a difference between money and currency, and the main number one difference is store of value, right? So the dollar is a fantastic currency. It's a fantastic medium of exchange. And some could argue actually that the existence of the dollar strengthens Bitcoin, right? Because as the abuse of the dollar continues to rise with the US government spending, in the last 30 days, they spent $9.88 billion per day, right? And at the same time, the Federal Reserve, through their quantitative tightening, destroyed about $200 million per day. So on a net basis, there's about $9.6 billion that the government is spending into circulation. Well, that is the definition of inflation, because you're increasing the amount of circulating currency units. And they can do that based on the vote, based on the budget, right? They take a vote, they pass the budget, they borrow the money, and then they spend it into circulation. That is our problem here today. You hear a lot of people, a lot of economists talk about the 1970s. Like we have 1970s problems. Our problems are more like the 1940s, because in the 70s, a lot of that inflation took place by the banks lending. So people came to the banks to borrow money, and they happily lent money. Well, the amount of money they lent increased the amount of circulating credit units, and that created inflation. Well, when Volcker raised interest rates all the way up to 20%, there wasn't a large debt, there wasn't a big government deficit, and the amount of people who wanted to borrow went way down. And that's not the scenario that we see today. So what's happening today, where everybody's waiting to see recessionary prices, and even the economy itself is slowing down, but the prices keep going up? They call that stagflation. How is this happening? Well, we can look back to the 1940s to explain this instead of the 70s, because in the 40s we had inflation as well, but the inflation came from government spending. Government spending. These are the two biggest ways to increase the dollar supply, because a lot of people, they don't understand that there are actually 4 different types of currency. So of course you have fiat cash currency, but there's only about $5 trillion of cash that's circulating right now. And that's as of last quarter. The new numbers, it changes every quarter. But then you have central bank reserves are another form of the dollar, bank deposits, and treasuries. So fiat, bank deposits, central bank reserves, and treasuries. Those are 4 different types of dollars. I bet you most millennials watching this podcast, when they think of dollar, they only think of one thing, or maybe 2. They think of cash, or they think of a bank deposit. But they're not thinking of central bank reserves, and they're not thinking of treasuries. But these 2 are also a form of the dollar. And if any one of those forms of the dollar expands, its supply is expanded by government vote or by bank lending, that right there is inflation. Well, of course, as you know, with Bitcoin, nobody can expand the supply. There's 21 million coins, and there will never be any more. That fact, coupled with the difficulty adjustment, is what creates this magical synopsis, this magical synchronicity between the laws of economics and then the real world consequences of the actions of our government. And as they continue to increase all 4 of those forms of the dollar and create inflation, Bitcoin is here to protect our value. It's savings technology. And if our generation can understand that, then we can easily opt out. It reminds me of that meme where the politician is on a plank over a cliff and all the people
and
are
the rest
standing.
of the people are holding him up. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just like, hey, instead of saving dollars and holding this guy up, take your dollars that you earn at work, spend them at the store for what you need. But when you have something left over, you know what to do with it. You can't save currency. You can save money. Well, the best form of money by far is Bitcoin. So let's just opt out peacefully. We don't have to crush the Federal Reserve and fight the government. Let them do what they're going to do, because Bitcoin will protect you through the laws of economics. Take your savings and save it in Bitcoin. Don't fall for the idea that higher interest rates
Yeah.
means a stronger dollar.